What if your podcast could build your business before you even have an offer? Well, in this episode of the Podcast Cafe, I'm joined by Christi Johnson, a business coach and the host of the Dream Biz Podcast. Don't you just love that name? We talk about how starting her podcast actually helped her find clarity, build authority, and ultimately launch a sustainable coaching business. So what began as a passion project through the pandemic turned into a training ground and marketing engine for her current business. Christi shares how podcasting gave her the confidence and credibility to become a coach, and how she uses her show now as the backbone of all of her content, from blog posts to lead magnets to social media to Pinterest to email. You are actually going to be so impressed by the amount of content that you can squeeze out of a podcast, and Christi can really prove that. So whether you're just starting out or wanting to repurpose smarter, or wanting to become the expert, this conversation with Christi is full of insights into how podcasting can help you with your long-term goals. Welcome to the Podcast Cafe, where we're serving up everything you need to know about podcasting, from tips, stories, and strategies for podcasters from podcasters. I'm your host, Haley Hayhurst, the founder of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcast agency helping business owners, creatives, and thought leaders launch and grow their shows. Whether you're just starting out or want to take your podcast to the next level, this is the place for you. Each week, we'll dive into practical tips, actionable strategies, and of course, stories from other podcasters so that you can build up a podcast that you love and that works for your business. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's get started. Welcome to the Podcast Cafe. Hey, Christi, welcome into the Podcast Cafe. I am so excited to be chatting with you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Haley. I'm so excited to be here.
Of course. So we connected not too long ago. I was actually on your podcast, which I'll link in the show notes. And so now the tables are turned and I get to interview you.
Yes, I'm so excited. It was so great having you on the show. Everyone should check it out. We talked about podcasting and marketing, obviously, because that is your wheelhouse. And it was so much fun. So I'm so glad I can be here. I love a good podcast swap.
Oh my gosh, me too. Me too. So my very first question that I have for you, a very important one, is since we are in the Podcast Cafe, what is your go-to coffee order?
1,000%. It is a iced lavender oat milk latte.
Oh my gosh, delicious. No one said that on the podcast yet.
And I love oat milk. I'm not even lactose intolerant, but I try to just cut out dairy sometimes. And so I do it in my coffee order.
Yum. I love an oat milk. Where are you located again?
I'm in Greenville, South Carolina. So it is in the northwestern part of South Carolina, kind of close to like Asheville, North Carolina. So the foothills of the Blue Ridge Parkway. Most people will be familiar with the Blue Ridge Parkway, but nice. We're down in the foothills of it.
Okay, very cool. I'm going to have to try a lavender latte. That sounds delicious.
Definitely.
Oh my gosh. Well, we are here today to talk all about your podcast and your business. Your podcast is the Dream Biz Podcast. So why don't you start off by telling us about why you started it and what it's about?
Absolutely. So my podcast is called the Dream Biz Podcast, and I've actually been through a few names of the podcast over the years. So I always encourage people, if they're starting a podcast, just go ahead and start. Even if you don't have the perfect name or the perfect cover, just go ahead and start. I started my podcast really after the COVID pandemic because I was stuck in my house and I had not that much work to do. I was working as a private photo editor and people were not really sending galleries because weddings weren't happening. So I wasn't working. And I just had this need to share my voice. I've always been someone who likes to talk, and I've always been someone who likes to teach. And I just had this, it felt like a calling that I needed to get on a podcast and share my voice. So I started it as a COVID passion project, and I realized that I absolutely loved talking about business. I knew that I wanted it to be a business podcast because I had in the back of my head that I might want to be a coach one day, which I am now. At the time, I was not a coach, but I wanted to kind of start getting into more thought leadership and more coaching types of conversations and really helping people with their business strategy. So I started my podcast. And also, I wanted it to make my long form content process a little bit easier. I was committed to putting out weekly long form content. And before podcasting, I was blogging. And as I started the podcast, I realized that I really loved speaking on the podcast and that I could use that to inform my long form content and in place of my long form content. So I did it to help keep myself accountable every single week to create that content. And also because it worked a lot better for my brain to be able to talk. And so that's what I did. I started my podcast really as a passion project. And then because I wanted to become a coach later, and also because I wanted to have that accountability to get my long form content out there in a way that was easier for me. It was way easier for me to turn on my mic and talk for 30 minutes than write a blog post. So I can talk on the podcast and then write my blog post from the podcast. So it just made it a whole lot easier for me. And that's why I started.
I love that. Very, very cool. And to your point of knowing that you wanted to start a coaching business down the line, I want to expand on this because I think that's such an important reason to start podcasting. I get questions all the time about people who want to start a podcast or they want to have a specific niche, but they're like, I'm not the expert in that yet. And I'm like, no one is truly the expert in anything until you are, right? And part of becoming the expert is having other people see you as such. Like, no one's going to know you're the best person to talk about this if you're not talking about that. So I want to hear about the evolution of like, you knew you wanted to start, you knew you wanted to do coaching one day. Were you interviewing other coaches? Were you talking on certain topics? What did the evolution look like?
That is a great question. And I love that you asked that. And I can also kind of share how the name of the podcast evolved for me over time. So when I first started the podcast, it was called the Freedom to Flourish podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I had launched a membership program where I was going to be helping other business owners, mainly photographers, because that was my niche at the time. And I was going to be helping them learn how to build more sustainable businesses in a way that worked for them. So I was really passionate about, and still am, about doing things that work for you and your business and not doing something because someone said that you should do it. There are so many voices out there online telling you how to do business, and I really wanted to give people the freedom to do business how they wanted to. So I started my podcast kind of to start developing my skills in speaking about the different things that I wanted to talk about. And it kind of went along with the launch of my membership that I launched later, which was called the Freedom to Flourish Community. And as I started the podcast, I did solo episodes, and I just took basically the pieces that I wanted to be speaking about to my community members. So it was things like how to set up your marketing schedule, how to find your first clients in business, how to do a business plan and set your goals. So I did an episode on quarterly goal planning. So all these things that were business strategy focused in a way that would help you find what works for you in a sustainable way. And so I started out as solo episodes where I was just doing bite-sized episodes on those different things. And then as I got into it, my membership wasn't really growing. And so I kind of put that on the back burner, and I didn't really feel like it was time for me to be a coach at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I still wanted to keep showing up because I fell in love with podcasting and I loved it over blogging every single week. It was way more fun for me. And I was not going to do guest episodes really because I thought it was too much work. But then I also didn't really know where I would find guests to be aligned. But then I had someone reach out to me from a PR firm, and her name's Megan Ely from OFD Consulting. She's an incredible person, and I've had her as a guest on my podcast twice. And she reached out to me and she said, hey, I'm looking to fill seats. Hey, I own a PR company. I would love to be a guest on your podcast. And I have other people who are interested in being guests on podcasts, and I would love to have them on your podcast. And she found me because I am in the wedding industry, and she found me in a Facebook group, a wedding Facebook group. And so I'm sitting there like, why does she want to have people on my podcast? I have like 10 listeners. Like, this makes no sense. But I was like, okay. So I said, yeah, come on my podcast. That'd be great. That's all these episodes that I don't have to come up with the content. And so I didn't really know what I was getting into. I didn't really know how to do a guest episode because I'd never done it before. But I had such a great experience because the people that she sent to me were already vetted by her PR company. So they were already great guests. She sent me their topics and everything ahead of time, and they were all aligned because I was in the wedding industry and she was in the wedding industry. So I started doing the guest episodes, and I really enjoyed them, and I enjoyed connecting with other people. And I changed the name of the podcast at that time to the Crush Your Goals with Christi podcast, because I thought that I really thought that I was going to be helping people more with goal setting and things like that in their business. And again, that didn't really work out for a couple years, but I kept showing up. I did take a break from podcasting for a little bit because I was dealing with some things with my mental health. And so I wasn't really able to kind of show up every single week. So I took a break for a while. And I think it's really important to take those breaks when you need to. Everybody always says you got to show up every single week, like rain or shine. But for me, I was like, I'm not going to cause myself an anxiety, a panic attack every week to get the content out there if it's not serving me. So I took some time to kind of collect and, decide if this was what I really wanted to be doing. So then from there, I decided, yes, I do want to come back to podcasting. And on my 100th episode, I relaunched it as the Dream Biz Podcast. And the idea behind the Dream Biz Podcast was that I would give actionable tips on how to grow your business your way. So throwing out the rule book and doing what works for you and what also is going to help support your mental health. So that was 68 episodes ago, and I'm still going strong. So I've been weekly since then, and it has been great. And I now use it as a tool to continue to speak about things. And now I am ready to be a coach. I just launched my coaching business at the beginning of this year. And I'm so glad that I did that, because now I have, 160 episodes that I can show to people that I've been speaking on topics about business strategy and sustainable business strategies and doing what works for you. So I'm really glad that I did incorporate that early on. Now that I am ready to step into that coaching field. So it really has served me along the way, but I also haven't felt the need to stick into a structure or something that I decided on. If it's not serving me anymore, I feel like I have the freedom to switch it up. I changed the podcast name 3 times. I'm pretty confident it's going to stay this from now on. I even trademarked Dream Biz. So I'm kind of stuck now, but it really does encapsulate what I want to talk about. And so it has grown over the years to serve me and my business. It's giving me lots of practice, talking about business topics, connecting with other people on the podcast and having them come on as experts. And now I'm able to kind of have more of that credibility to show people that, hey, yes, I have been speaking on business strategy for a few years, and you can trust me as a business coach, and here's the evidence, so it really has grown with me and my business.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that story, because I think that is what people need to hear. The topic or even the name that you start your podcast with does not have to be the last name or topic it'll ever have. It can and should change with your business. So now that you have 168 episodes, yes, people can go back and listen to your first episodes that were about starting a business, and now all these interviews with experts, and still your coaching episodes. And so I think that evolution piece is definitely an important part. And I have to ask, what was it like changing the name of your podcast? I know some people that want to change the names of their podcasts, but they are nervous. They're like, what are people going to think? How did it go for you?
Oh my goodness. I did not have any of those fears at all, to be honest. I think because I've always been the type of person that is well, this is serving me better and this explains it better. So of course I'm going to go with it. So I felt like the Freedom to Flourish podcast was kind of vague. It didn't really say anything about what my podcast would actually be about. But then as I transitioned into Crush Your Goals with Christi, it was a little bit closer because, okay, I'm going to be helping you with goal setting. But then also it was like, am I helping you with fitness goals, financial goals, business goals? Like, what is this about? So I felt like changing it to the Dream Biz podcast made more sense because I'm talking about business and building a business that's the business of your dreams and really works for you. So it went totally well for me because I didn't have any of those feelings of like, oh my goodness, I shouldn't change it. At the same time, I didn't really start growing my audience, and like I wasn't established as like a well-known name of a podcast that people would know. Like if you think of like Jenna Kutcher's podcast, the Gold Digger podcast, if she were to change her podcast, that would probably not be great for her because everyone knows the name of her podcast. But for me, not that many people knew the name, so it didn't really feel like it was that big of a deal for me. So I just went with it. And then I made it a special announcement on my Instagram and my email. I said, we're celebrating 100 episodes with a brand new name for the podcast and new cover art. It's the Dream Biz Podcast. And I felt like this reflects more what my goals are. And the response was all positive. I didn't have any negative response. The only thing that happened was I did have one person who was a guest on the podcast previously said, hey, congratulations on your new podcast. And I just said, oh, actually, it's the same podcast. I had changed the name. So that's really the worst thing that happened.
Right. But, and like getting congratulations and bringing new attention to it is never a bad thing.
Absolutely. So it actually went really well for me.
I love that. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. I think, I get that question a lot, and I want to be like, it's not that big of an issue unless you are like Jenna Kutcher, right? Yeah. Unless it's like you have a top 10 podcast. You have a lot of flexibility, and I think that is the beautiful part of marketing and having like a smaller business is you can be well known in your niche, in your community, and you still have the flexibility to make changes because you might not be like a household name yet,
Yeah. And I kind of knew that with the other names. Like I kind of knew that they weren't like, I wasn't all in on either of those names. So I didn't do anything like I didn't have the domain name for either of those things. It was always just christijohnsoncreative.com/podcast. Like it was always the same thing. So it didn't really cause me any problems because they could still get my episodes at the same place on my website. It's still christijohnsoncreative.com/podcast. Now I do have dreambizpodcast.com, but before that I didn't have it. So I didn't have to deal with anything like that. So if you were thinking about changing your name, just think through like, why are you changing the name and how important is it to you? If you were like, yes, this is the totally aligned name, then I would definitely I would definitely go for it and change that name and just know, okay, you might need to change these backlinks or whatever, or keep that URL and do a redirect. It's really not going to be that big of a deal unless you're like a household name, which most of us are not.
Yeah, right, exactly. And to go back to your point about having this as the backbone of all of your content, I agree with you because you can't turn a blog post into a podcast episode. You can't turn a reel into a podcast episode, but you can turn a podcast episode into both a blog post and a reel. So it gives you a lot of content to play with. What are some of the ways that you repurpose and utilize your podcast episodes, maybe in your coaching now? Do you ever assign it as like homework for your clients? I know a lot of people that do that.
Yes. Yeah, actually I do. That's a great question. So yeah, even today I was on a coaching call with someone and we were talking about scaling their business. And I said, oh, I have the perfect podcast episode for you to listen to from another business owner who had scaled their business in the same way that they were thinking about. So I definitely use it in my coaching. As far as my marketing, it really is the backbone of my marketing, like you said. So I take my podcast every single week and I turn it into a blog post. And it's really easy with the help of ChatGPT. I take the transcript and I ask ChatGPT. I've had to kind of work with it a lot to not sound like a robot and to not change my content very much. But I have prompts that I that I do to help it. Like I always say, hey, can you retain like the core content of exactly what I'm saying and the tone of voice and the things that I actually say, and just give me a better formatted blog post from that, and then I go through and edit it and make sure it's still sounding like me and everything. But that makes it so much faster for me, whereas before I was having to like write so many words of content, which is just so time consuming. Not that a
Yeah.
podcast is not time consuming, but I enjoy podcasting and I didn't really enjoy writing those blogs. So that's a big thing too when it comes to podcasting, is like I enjoy this. So that's why I love it so much. So I turn it into a blog post, and then I have started with all of my podcast episodes that I feel are really, really solid and really good, or that are the most downloaded. I have turned them into free guides. So I make a really quick guide on Google Docs. It's not like super fancy, but it goes through the main points of the podcast. And then I also have an actual checklist at the end of it, because I'm all about action steps and giving people things that they can do right away. So any of those podcasts that I feel like are like my core content, or anything where I feel like, yeah, I really did great there, or this guest and we crushed it. It was so many great tips. I turn it into a free guide. And then from there, I take it on Pinterest, and every single free guide that I have, I think I have like 30 of them. Every single one, every week I'm putting on Pinterest, because Pinterest is one thing that I'm trying to be more aggressive on these days, because I'm trying to grow my podcast and I'm also trying to grow my email list at the same time. So I'm taking my free guides, and with the help of Tailwind Create, which is a fabulous tool where they can create pins for you, I am turning each guide into 5 pins every single week, and I'm going through all of them. And I think that every week I'm doing 5 pins for each of the 30 guides. It's a lot of
Wow.
pins, but with Tailwind, it makes it really easy.
Yeah.
So I'm doing the guides, which are like freebies for email. And then another thing is that I'm going to start doing, but I haven't done it yet, is to put the email box with their name and their email address to get the guide right in the copy of the blog post, like right in the middle of the blog post, so that if they're reading the blog post, there's also another opportunity for them to sign up to get the guide, and that also gets them on my email list. And so I also do pins to my blog posts as well. So the guide gets a pin, the blog post gets a pin, all of my blog posts get a pin, and the blog posts come from the podcast episode. And then from there, I'm also using it to be a part of my newsletter. So I send a newsletter every single week, an email newsletter, and I feature 3 podcast episodes in each newsletter. But then the most current, because sometimes people will not, like they'll miss an episode,
Yeah.
or they'll open their inbox, they won't open one of my emails for a few weeks. So I like to keep the most recent 3 in my email, but then that email is going to focus on the most recent podcast episode, and I'll have some copy in there that gives them a quick win, so that I like them to be able to get a win from the email because they're subscribed to my email list. I want them to also have something that they get for being a part of my email list, but that all comes from the podcast. And then I do also encourage them to listen to the podcast as well. So every podcast episode is getting a blog post. A lot of them are getting turning into a lead magnet. They're going into my newsletter. And then I'm also doing 2 reels and 1 carousel post a week from my podcast. So I'll do a carousel post that kind of sums up the main points that can give them some really great value. So I'm educating them. And then I like to share clips from my podcast as a reel. So I do 2 of those every week. So yeah, it's a lot of content that you can get just from the 1 episode, and it makes it really, really easy. Instead of having to be like, well, what am I going to post? Well, I just
Yeah.
have to come up with my podcast topics. That's all I have to come up with.
Yeah. And are you creating other content, or is it really just the podcast repurposing?
I am creating other content on Instagram.
Yeah.
Not very much though. I do create some content that is focused on my coaching, like what it's like to work with me as a coach, or if I have something, if I'm doing a launch. So I'm launching my one-on-one program coming up soon. So I'll have a lot more content that's focused like on the tenets of my service and what I want people to get out of it and those types of things. And then like my stories, I do like to post stories, and those are not all from my podcast, but it's not really that much content that I'm creating apart from the podcast. It's really just those times when I'm doing a launch, or I do try to once a week have either a post where I'm introducing myself or where I am talking about my services and calling them to sign up in some way. So I have those ones that I'm kind of going through week by week. So, but most of it is the podcast. And then I do create content on Threads, but honestly, Threads for me is just a place to have fun. I don't really have a strategy. I just post my thoughts that come to my
it's like
brain.
Twitter.
Exactly. And I've actually found some great success, like meeting people. I've also been able to connect with lots of other podcasters on Threads, to just say, hey, I have a podcast. Is anyone interested in being a guest? I've gotten a lot of people there. I found a lot of people looking for guests there. But for me, Threads is just a place to have fun and not feel like I'm, fallen prey to the algorithm gods. Like
Totally.
it's just a place to have fun for me. But
I love
most
that.
of the content, like 80%, is from the podcast.
No, that's amazing. I love to hear exactly how you break it down, because it's a lot of content you get from one podcast episode. And, any business can do that with having their podcast, especially if you focus it as we're talking about the backbone of your business. So with that comes goals and making sure it's sustainable, which I know in your coaching and, throughout your podcast is something that you focused on. Like you mentioned, you took a break from it for a while when it wasn't feeling sustainable. And so now that you've found the sustainability, can you tell us a little bit about maybe how you would coach your clients on building something that is both sustainable but also aligned? So you can, because if you start a podcast that isn't, directly aligned with your business, you're not going to be able to repurpose it in so many ways. Like you could have like pieces here and there, but it's not going to give it the same results that you're seeing from like a very aligned podcast to your business.
That is so true. And I really appreciate you asking this question. So for me, sustainable growth is number one. I did have a mental health crisis that led me to shutting down my business for 6 months, and I would not wish that on anyone. I burnt out, and it was terrible. And I think a lot of business owners do struggle with burnout because there's all these rules that we think we have to follow, and even the content, all the content that I just listed, that's so much content. Someone could be listening and think, oh my goodness, that is too much for me. Well, that's not how I started. I didn't start doing all of that content. I started with just one episode a week and one blog post a week. That was it. I wasn't even sending it to my newsletter. And even if one episode a week is too much for you, then do one every 2 weeks. That's totally fine. So it's really important to be honest with your capacity and not try to fit yourself into someone else's box. That is a huge problem that I see all the time, where people say, well, I should be doing this and I should be doing that and I should be doing 10 posts, but I still have a full-time job, so I can't do this. I always encourage people to stop, take a breath, and really be honest about what is your capacity, how much time do you actually have, and what is going to be enjoyable for you to create. If you are creating content and it's not enjoyable, people are going to pick up on that. I think it's like when I was studying to be a pianist, I have a master's degree in piano performance, and I was studying for my graduate piano recital, and I was working on this piece that was really simple. It was a musically easy piece, but I was struggling. It didn't sound good at all. And I played it for one of my friends, and he said, what are you thinking as you're playing? And I said, well, I'm stressed out because I'm really worried that people aren't going to think this is as beautiful as I want them to believe that it is. Like, I know it's beautiful, and I'm stressed about that I can't get it as beautiful as I want it to be. And he said, well, if you're stressed out when you're playing this music, the audience is going to pick up on that. But if you are focused on actually having fun with this piece of music, the audience is going to respond to that and see that. And I think the same thing applies to the creative work that we do in our businesses, because creating content, it's creative. And so it's really important that you have fun with what you're creating. So if you're doing something just because someone else told you to do it, that's not a good enough reason. I always need to have a reason that is like, yes, I want to do this. So be honest with about your capacity. How much time do you actually have, and what would be fun for you to do? And don't worry about the rest of the stuff. Just find that one thing that is fun for you to do and get consistent on that, whatever consistency means to you. It doesn't have to mean every single week or every single day or whatever that looks like. Just hone in on that one thing. And then as you feel like you are a little bit farther along and you feel like you can add more to that, then that's where you can add in more content. I was really struggling with Pinterest, for example, because Pinterest kept telling me you need to create at least 5 pins a day or it's not going to be worthwhile. And I was so frustrated. So that's when I upgraded my Tailwind account to be able, I mean, it's part of their plan, but they got me. I upgraded my Tailwind account to be able to create more pins using their AI tool that made it really fast. So I found a tool that made it so much faster so that I could do it in a way that is now sustainable for me and I can actually do it. Whereas before I couldn't do it. So be honest about your capacity, do what's fun for you, and then find those tools to help you save time where you can. And I believe time is money. If you can spend money on a tool that is going to get you back time, it's worth it to me, because I would rather spend my time hanging out with my nieces and nephews than slaving over my computer making 30 times 5 pins a week. No way.
That'd be way too much. That'd be way too much. No.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. And I do think that there are a lot of AI tools that we could lean on more. So Tailwind is a great one. I'm not on Pinterest, but it is something in my mind that I'm like, I used to be, and it actually had really great results. But to your point, it is some work, but I'll have to check out Tailwind again and see. I don't think they had AI back when I was using it like a few years ago.
Yeah, no, it's almost all of the tools that we're using nowadays have some type of AI feature, and it's up to you to decide whether it's going to be good or not. Right. Some of them are terrible.
No,
but
very true.
Some of them are great. And I was just talking today with one of my clients about, she was struggling because she has a full-time job, and she said, well, when I get home, I have 20 minutes before I have to be back to this next thing, and I feel like I should be working on my course that I'm launching. And I was like, no, you need that 20 minutes for yourself to relax. Like, you have to take care of yourself. So I wouldn't have that, oh, I should be doing this, or I should be doing that. That's going to create shame and feelings of guilt. And you're not going to find it enjoyable if you're operating from a place of shame rather than excitement. You want to feel that excitement. So I always encourage my clients to find what is going to be exciting for you. And if it's not exciting for you, there's something deeper going on. What either you're putting too much on your plate, or you haven't found the thing that actually aligns with you yet. Like for me, podcasting was great and blogging was not. For other people, they might hate podcasting. And if they hate talking into a microphone, I wouldn't recommend having
Definitely not. Definitely not. Yeah. But to your point, I think that, if you do love podcasting, I really think that business owners at every stage of business should consider it.
Absolutely.
In their marketing. I think that the opportunities it creates, the collaboration, the, growth that you can have, the more you talk about something, the more experienced you are in it. So absolutely, I think that it's such a underutilized. I know everyone makes jokes about how everyone and their mom has a podcast, but like, that's just not the truth, Like, yes, maybe a lot of people start podcasts, but the stat is most people don't make it past 3 episodes. So they'll launch, they'll put out a trailer, they'll put out another episode, then they're like, you know what? Not for me. So if you make it past 3 episodes, you're kind of like in the top % of podcasters.
You're ahead of the game.
Absolutely.
I love that.
So yeah, you've shared a lot of good advice today. I really appreciate you breaking down consistency and how you, kind of have it grow with you. I have a couple rapid fire questions that I want to hear what advice you have for podcasters to wrap us up. But okay, what is the first podcast that you ever listened to or had like the biggest impact on your life?
Wow. I would say Online Marketing Made Easy by Amy Porterfield was the first one. And then just a personal one is Stuff You Should Know. I love that podcast. That's not a business podcast, but I love it. Yeah. So I'm going to answer those two.
Okay, I love that. Do you have any other podcasts you recommend people listen to?
Oh my goodness. Well, definitely listen to the Podcast Cafe and also listen
Thanks.
to the Dream Biz podcast.
Definitely. Definitely. No, I
Um,
love that.
yeah, but to be honest, I don't actually listen to a ton of business podcasts. Right now, the podcasts that I'm listening to are more comedy. So I listen to Smosh Reads Reddit Stories and I listen to Rhett and Link's Ear Biscuits. They're both YouTubers. That's just where I am right now with my podcasting. I'm listening to things that are going to give me a laugh rather than tell me what I should be doing in my business.
Yeah, no, I
That's where
think
I am
that's
right
so
now.
important because people always ask me what my favorite podcasts are, and I'm like, I listen to so many for my clients. Like, yes, I listen to other podcasts too, but like, I know some people that listen to like 8 podcasts a week. Like, that's they religiously follow it, and I'm like, no, not
Yeah,
me.
I
But
I religiously follow those two and stuff you should know.
yeah,
Um, and then definitely Amy Porterfield's podcast that I already mentioned, Online Marketing Made Easy. It's a great one.
yeah. What's your favorite podcast listening platform?
Ooh, well, I was previously an Android user, and I listened on Google Podcast, and then they got rid of Google
Yeah.
Podcasts. So right now I'm listening on Spotify, which
Okay.
is not my favorite, but it's fine. I do like it on Spotify Wrapped, but that's what
Yeah.
I'm listening to right now.
Okay, I love that. I love that. Okay, 2 last questions for you. I would love to hear any advice that you have for podcasters. Like, what advice do you want to leave them with?
My advice would be to grow at a sustainable pace. I know I said that already, but that's truly the biggest piece of advice that I could give. If you are overwhelmed by the idea of releasing an episode every single week, then maybe create a shorter podcast every single week or release something every 2 weeks. I do think that having something come out at least every 2 weeks is a good idea. But my advice would just be to find something that works for you and a pace that works for you.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I know someone that has had a podcast for the past 16 years. He was actually on this podcast. His name is Gordon Firemark. He's a lawyer. I think he's episode 5. I don't know. I'll put it in the show notes. But he has had a podcast for the past like 16 years because he only puts out one a month, and that's what's sustainable for him.
Perfect.
And like that's way better than burning out after, 3 episodes. But I'm right there with you. Like, I love putting out 1 episode a week. I have clients that put out 2 a week. I have clients that put out 1 a month. Like, it's all across the board. But I always say to them, yeah, consistency can mean anything. It's just whatever you can do. Whatever's not going to
Exactly.
freak you out and like, burn you out. So, no, I really love that piece of advice. And Christy, last question for you. What is the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself through podcasting?
Wow. Well, I learned that at first it was hard for me to listen to people because I would get distracted and I wouldn't be able to follow up with questions to them as I was being a host.
Mm-hmm.
But then I also learned that I was able to learn how to be a better listener.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned how to be a better listener. I take notes now on the things that I want to come back on. And I think I have learned most of all that I am capable of growth, that I don't have to be stuck in a box, and that where I was when I first started is not where I am now, which is a good thing. So I learned that I needed to become a better listener. And then I was able to do some things to help myself become a better listener. So I would say that I'm capable of growth.
I love that. Ugh, what a valuable lesson. Tell us all about your coaching offer that you have now.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Thanks for asking. So I am right now working on launching my signature service, which is the Dream Biz Strategy Lab. And you can sign up for either 6 months or 1 year. And what's different about this coaching program is that I also offer some done with you implementation services. So the most coaching that you do with someone will be week to week coaching, and you're just talking to them, and that's it. But I really like to get into the nitty gritty of people's businesses and their strategies and actually help them. I spent a couple of years as an online business manager and was doing a lot of management for people and setting up systems and workflows and things like that. So I wanted to implement that into my coaching. So it starts off with a VIP day where we really dive in and work on your biggest priorities. I can set up your email platform or set up your website or your funnels, your workflows, whatever it is. And then from there, every quarter, we meet for a deep dive into your strategy to really define what you want your strategy to look like, set your goals for the quarter. And then in between that, we have monthly coaching calls. And then in between that, we have unlimited access to me on Slack through voice message or chat so that we can work through any mindset issues that come up. Sometimes you just need a pep talk. Sometimes something happens and you're like, oh my goodness, I feel terrible about this. I don't know what to do next. And you just need someone to talk to. So we have that. So it's called the Dream Biz Strategy Lab because it's all about strategy and working on things that will be aligned for you. It's all about growing without sacrificing your mental health. I'm really passionate about that. And it is launching very soon. And you can learn all the details about that at christijohnsoncreative.com/strategy. And I'm sure Haley will have that in the show notes. But that is my one-on-one coaching program that is launching very soon. And I'm really excited about it.
I love that. I'm excited for you. Thanks for telling us all about that. Christi, this has been so much fun. I will put all of your links in the show notes, but I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today in the Podcast Cafe.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Thank you so much for joining me in the Podcast Cafe. I hope you're leaving with fresh ideas and inspiration to take your podcast to the next level. Remember, podcasting is a journey and you don't have to do it alone. I'm here to help you every step of the way. Let's connect. Be sure you follow me on Instagram at Espresso Podcast Production or visit espressopodcastproduction.com for more tips, resources, and behind-the-scenes insights. I'd love to hear about your podcasting journey. If you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling extra generous, I'd love it if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps more podcasters just like you find the show. Until next time, grab your coffee, keep creating, and I'll see you back here in the Podcast Cafe.